Nigerian ministers have been accused of what can be described as an interim government since the announcement of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu as president-elect. The Human Rights Watch said the ministers have deployed resources and instruments of governance to the aid of the president-elect and candidate of the All Progressive Congress during the presidential election. In recent weeks, several ministers have been publicly seen defending the result of the 2023 elections, a situation that has been a cause for concern. The Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, and others have all been pinpointed as agents of the incoming government as they have been accused of abandoning their current duties. Now, joining me on the show today to unpack this issue of a government within a government, Emmanuel Onwubiko, National Coordinator, Human Rights Writers Association of Nigeria, and Achike Chure, a public affairs analyst. A warm welcome to you, gentlemen, and thanks for joining me on the program.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to start with you, Emmanuel. Can you kindly explain to our viewers what the Human Rights Writers Association of Nigeria, HURIWA, is alleging regarding the existence of an interim government currently being run by 3 cabinet-level ministers in President Buhari's administration?
First and foremost, election is supposed to have been over by now after the February 25th contest, in as much as there are still cases that are, that were instituted before the election tribunal, but officially election ought to have been over by now, campaign particularly ought to have been over, but we still see certain individuals, especially cabinet-level ministers who have apparently left their, cabinet-level positions and actually not showing loyalty totally and absolutely to the government that appointed them, but are rather junketing and globetrotting, at the behest of the president-elect, who, as we know it, pragmatically and in terms of constitutional powers, there is no place in the Constitution for a president-elect to carry out any kind of activity on behalf of the government, because he has not yet been inaugurated. He will be inaugurated on May 29th. But you already have ministers who are paid from the taxpayers' funds, junketing all over the world. Some of them, the Kayamo, the Minister of State for Labor, who is still parading about as the spokesperson for the campaign. I don't know which campaign he is the spokesperson. Is it a campaign of Bola Ahmed Tinubu that has already been proclaimed as the president-elect by INEC? Why is he still the spokesperson of the campaign? Is campaign still going on? Now you have Kayamo. You also have the Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Sunday Dare, and first and foremost, we had, we saw the Minister of Information and Culture, who was all over the place. I think he's still in London, because some of the journalists that went with him are still been seen. Some of them are still sending videos, are still sending information from London. Today, some of them were in Chatham House in London. The other time, in USA, they were in New York Times. They were all over the place, all over the international media, campaigning and working for the president-elect. And here we are. We have been told by the security forces that there were plots to set up an interim government, and a lot of people who are learned in law are saying it is not possible to have an interim government when it is not provided for in the Constitution. But what do you call these kinds of strategic communications and spreading of propaganda on behalf of someone that has already been proclaimed as president-elect, but he does not have any office provided for by the Constitution? So who is giving these ministers, about 4 of them, who is giving them the directive? Who has sent them to London? Who has sent them to the USA? Who has sent them to all over Europe to canvass support for the APC that has already been declared as the winner So why are they all over the world frittering taxpayers' funds, wasting our money on flight tickets, on hotels, hotel bills, and every other thing? Even a lot of this, I saw one of the special assistants, to the president. President has over 100 special assistants. One of them was cited in one of the functions in Washington, D.C. with the three ministers, the Minister of Youth and Sports, the KMOs, and the rest of them. You know, you begin to ask, what are they really doing? Who are they working for? Who is paying them? Are campaigns still going on?
Totally.
This is why we have concluded as Huriwa that perhaps this interim government that the DSS told us, DSS that is actually now behaving like an arm wing of APC, told us that some certain people are planning to have interim government. It looks like the interim government is already, going on with the kind of activities, illegal activities that these ministers are carrying out. As God knows who is directing them, who is funding their trips, who is paying for their hotels, who is paying for all these media campaigns that are going on all over the place. And Nigerians should ask, are we still in the electioneering period?
Thank you, Emmanuel. I'd like to bring in Achike Chuda in Lagos at this point in time. Now, Achike, this is the 23rd year of our uninterrupted democratic experience since 1999. We've had governments succeed themselves, a democratic government to another from the same party, and we've also seen from one party to another. What do you make of Huriwa's accusations of an interim government, a government within the government? What is the global best practices for transitioning from one government to another? Because some will say, you know, there's no big deal in what is happening. They're preparing the ground for taking over. And by the way, they all belong to the same party. So what do you make of all of this?
Description of what is happening is not the right kind of description. This is not an interim government issue. This is clearly a case of abuse of powers, abuse of responsibility by government officials. Regardless of whether the monies or the resources that are being used for this purpose comes from federal coffers or whether it comes from the candidates of the APC, who has been declared by INEC as the winner of the presidential election of February. You know, and I think that is what the issue is. When you want to talk about an interim government, you're talking about a parallel government arrangement that would also have essentially a duplication or replication of the offices that you have of the government that is on ground. And you do not have that in any way with even this arrangement where about 3 or 4 ministers are running, all over the world, trying to make a case for the APC. So it is not, an interim government issue, because an interim government issue, obviously, you'll be talking about, an interim, person that will run that government, an interim head of government. You're going to have, various cabinet, ministers, also in the interim government and other, duplications that will be taking place. So this is clearly a case of abuse of government resources or administrative resources of government and abuse of, the offices of these government officials. And so if you look at, and again, this is flies against the threat, or the warning by the DSS about a group of people trying to set up an interim government. Obviously, the DSS was talking about a group of people that are far removed from the APC, that do not have any affiliation with the ruling party, any affiliation with those who have been declared to have won the presidential election. The DSS was talking about an attempt to truncate the country's, civil order, the country's, democracy by having a parallel arrangement that is different from the arrangement that was spelled out by the results of the election as declared by the INEC. So this is a completely different, matter. Yes, obviously, you must ask questions about the deployment of government officials for purely partisan objectives. Because what is going on is that, for instance, the Minister of Information went to the United States and was making a case for the APC candidate that INEC has declared as the winner of the last presidential election. it is not his brief. He has spokesmen, members of his campaign team. They can decide, that if they want to continue with some level of campaign, maybe post-election, programs, they can do that. But I do not think that it is the responsibility of the minister, of a serving minister of government, to go to the United States to talk about how beautiful the election has been when that same election is under dispute in the court. So let the court decide, because that is what they told the oppositions not to complain, that they should go to court. So if the matter has gone to court, you are now putting pressure on the opposition because the opposition is criticizing a few things, that are going on, and you say they have no right since they have gone to court. So why would you, as a minister of state, have any right also, when the matter is in court, to make a case about how wonderful the election was, when it is the court that is going to determine whether that election was free, fair, and credible? So you see this abuse, and I think that essentially is what is going on. But in the classical case of having an interim government, we are talking about a parallel government and parallel offices of government, that is not exactly the case. 3 or 4 ministers who are junketing, the globe, in a partisan manner, of course, it is wrong, because they are ministers of the Federal Republic. They are not appointees of the APC as a political party. So that in itself, their activities abroad cannot symbolize, the running of a parallel government in the country.
Thank you, Achike. Now, back to you, Emmanuel. Achike just posited that, what the federal ministers are doing does not constitute as a parallel government, and we can say what they're doing amounts to abuse of power. What's your take on Achike's statement, and what evidence does your organization, Huriwa, have to support their claims that these ministers are working for the President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the All Progressive Congress instead of the current government, even though they belong to the same political party, the ruling All Progressives Congress?
What we have said, and what is so clear, is that the office of the president-elect is not provided for in the Constitution. There's no specific functions and powers that have been assigned to the person who has been proclaimed the president-elect. The analyst on this program was trying to explain what the DSS has said. I don't know where he got his information from, whether he works for the DSS. DSS did not tell Nigerians exactly what they meant by the existence of a plot by certain people to set up interim government. An interim government is not structurally, defined as that it has to be a parallel government. It has to be a government set up by people who didn't take part in the election, or people who don't have who don't have clear briefings on what to do. Interim government could. A government. No, but the definition
of interim government, and Nigeria has been through this situation of an interim government before. If you remember the post-June 12 crisis, when President Babangida was forced to step aside, and then he appointed an ex-Shonekon, you would see that they are not on the same, they're parallel governments, and they don't have the same understanding. So I believe Mr. Achike is right within his rights to say
he's not correct. He's not right, because there was no parallel government when Shoyinka was on seat. There was no parallel government. There was no two governments. It's a different thing when you have when you have opposition party setting up like what they have in Britain, whereby the party that is in power, the party that controls the parliament, is actually the party that runs the government, and there is a quasi government within government that is set up by the next leading political party that have the largest number of parliamentarians. They have specific offices that they have individuals that are appointed into such offices. You may not call that a parallel government or whatever. But interim government, the kind of interim government we are talking about is the type that you have ministers junketing all over the place.
So I want to put it to you, Emmanuel, if you permit me to ask this question. So why is Huriwa calling this alleged interim government, in inverted commas illegal and unconstitutional? And what impact could it have on the country? You do recall that this is not the first transitional government. What is the proper way to go about transitioning from one government to another that belong to the same political party? We've seen it with the People's Democratic Party in the past.
Yes, there's already a transition council. These individuals that are all over the place are not members of that transition council. And then what do you call him? The other guy, the AGF. AGF is supposed to coordinate the activities of this transition council. None of those guys who are all over the place, running all over the place, are actually carrying out the job of the transition council that has already been set up by the government. That is why Nigerians have to ask questions. What are they doing? If they're not actually running a government within the government, what are they doing? Who is sending them? Whose money are they using? It's quite important. The other analyst said, apart from the issue of the, who is paying the bills, this is a very critical question. It's a question of accountability. It's a question of transparency. Who is paying them matters so much. It matters so much to us as members of the public. They need to ask questions. They need to get the right answers from these individuals who are all over the place in Washington D.C., probably flying on first class tickets, going to Washington D.C., going to New York, going to UK, at the behest of a man that has already been proclaimed the winner of an election. What is their job other than trying to function as a quasi-government within a government? That is the question Nigerians should begin to ask, and that's what we're trying to tell Nigerians to ask these right questions.
Okay, thank you.